And such doctrines as the soul being created at the birth of the individual, and the soul being something that is tenuous and had to be saved and all that sort of stuff. It was created in order to try to make up for this lack of understanding. It was a very dark time in the development of the educational system of Western civilization, which was really church teaching, because the church and religion became politicized. In other words, the emphasis was upon power on the material plane rather than teaching on the so-called mental or spiritual plane.
And that continues.
And that continues even to this very day.
I'd like to ask you to discuss another of your teachings, and that has to do with the creation of great civilizations. You tell us that every great civilization is really the work of one savior.
That's right. Every great civilization has been the revelation of a great idea or a great truth in a long succession of revelations of truth down through the ages, beginning with ancient Persia and going through China and India, and then Egypt and Greece and Rome, and then Europe and Britain and America. Historians recognize this, and it's really interesting to organize that in a way that shows clearly the development of the idea of spiritual substance as an energy and a reality and an actuality, and the material world as a substance, which is a living substance rather than something that we now call mechanical, and dead matter. In ancient Persia, there was what we call the light and the darkness, Mazda and Ahriman. And Zoroaster really laid the foundation for future Christianity in establishing this duality. And then later on, the union of these two brought about the psychological aspect, in other words, the soul. The energy of spirit, in other words, which was Mazda, light, and the energy of matter came together and created, in the beginning, the energy of soul, in other words, the son of the father and the mother, And here we are as souls, conscious of ourselves and conscious of the world, because spirit, or life on the one hand, is interacting with matter and the energy of matter on the other. So father and mother, or matter, are giving birth to us. Soul is an actual state of energy, or it's an actual state of being, which some of these days, and I think in the very next 50 or 100 years, because science is already on the verge of this, science will be able to prove the existence of the energy of the soul. All kinds of techniques are now being developed in science to cross over from the material to the non-material aspect.
Now, every great civilization that we've known has reached a point where it flourished and then it died. And it usually died because of politics, greed, and a misuse of the energies.
The teaching.
The teaching.
When the teaching no longer was doing its work in the consciousness of the people who were incarnated in the civilizations, then that teaching, having been withdrawn from that consciousness, permits the civilization, the consciousness of the people, to begin to disintegrate. And civilization just naturally disintegrates, like a body when the soul is withdrawn from the body. So a civilization disintegrates over many centuries, gradually, like Rome did, after the universal soul in the civilization of Rome had done its work. In the meantime, a new wave and a new teaching, a new wave of consciousness begins its work in that same civilization. So while you see all the evidence of the decay of the old, if you know how to look at it, you see the beginning of a new civilization. They overlap invariably. And man's problem is that he cannot go from one to the other, apparently, without having tremendous upheavals of war and all kinds of economic and political problems and diseases of all kinds because he doesn't know how to go into the next state of energy, you see.
Well, you indicate that we don't seem to learn, that everything changes, the cells of our body, culture, but we remain
as souls.
as souls.
Forever.
Well, we remain as souls, but we only think of the physical. Isn't that what you say?
That's right.
And science seems to be doing the work that religion should be doing in helping us reveal.
Today, science is actually the high priest. The scientists are the high priests of our society, and the laboratories are the holy of holies. You know, there's where all the secrets are, and there's where the great truths are being revealed and brought out in symbolic language, like the ancient churches and religions brought out the great truths through symbolism. You know, through the stories of the gods and the goddesses and what went on in the mystery schools, the great ceremonies and rituals of the mystery schools. Today, science is a great ceremonial and ritualistic function to explain and reveal the universe, you see, and to make meaning of the universe. Each of these civilizations, it's interesting to note that the great truth that was revealed in Persia was taken by India, and an emphasis was made in India upon the inner self, that is, the psychological consciousness. The outer emphasis in China, that is, through the philosophers and the great teachers who taught people and groups of people how to live on the material plane with each other by obeying certain laws. This was really one of the great contributions of China. This is the reason that the Chinese and the Japanese, for example, are very, very polite to each other, and they have certain rituals that they perform as they meet each other and live together. And this was taken by Egypt eventually and made into a system of economic and political living. And the god who was in the psychological consciousness, for example, of India, became the pharaoh. He was the embodiment of this god, and he lived forever. The origin of the phrase, you know, the king is dead, long live the king, it came from Egypt. And over the top of every entrance into every temple in Egypt, there was the symbol of the sun and the wings and the serpent around the sun, and the phrase, the Son of Righteousness with healing in his wings. This Son of Righteousness, or the Son of God, the Son of Man, these phrases all were taken by Christianity and applied to Jesus, you know. But they had their origin in Egypt. And the divinity aspect of man was made human in the person of the God. Of course, this was also true in Japan, where the emperor even today is still God, you know.
Now, what happens in the initiation process?
Well, the initiation process in every great civilization, in the schools of those civilizations, was the means by which the student was taken from one state of consciousness to another, whereby greater truths were revealed to him gradually in various degrees or grades. Even today, our civilization presents these truths in what we call the grades of our school system. That is, we have the lower grades and the higher grades. We have the graduate degrees, and we have the master's degree, which comes directly from the ancient phrase, you know, the great masters, and the hierarchical setup of the educational system that was in the hands of the masters, and then the doctors, the teachers. The word doctor means teacher, and the doctorate is a teaching degree, gives them power to be a great teacher. And so the initiation system was really that. And in the mystery schools, what we now call science and psychology and metaphysics, which is really the study of the mind in the Aristotelian sense, and the doctrines and the teachings of how the mind can influence matter, all of these were gradual revelation in the initiation systems. The first initiation in the ancient mystery schools of India and Greece and Egypt was the explanations of the meaning of matter, and how we can relate to material substance and how we can get meaning out of matter, and we apply the truth to matter as it actually is and not as we suppose it to be. I mean, matter has a value to us that does not really exist in the material world. We make it up, you see, and it comes because we have never been initiated into the real substance of matter, you see. And the same thing is true with the psychological function of the emotional nature. We don't know how to handle our emotions, and we're neurotic people, and we react to such things as the great leaders of our nation standing up and telling us all kinds of things which we don't have any business believing, and yet because of our emotions we react through fear and through anxiety and through a sense of greed, as you earlier said, in order to be able to relate to what he calls the threat. If we don't obey him, if we don't do what he says, then we fear that we're going to have dire consequences, you see.
Of course, part of that is our orientation process.
Yeah.
You have said very interestingly, I think, that the fear of man is the fear of death. And with that, you're saying that we have been oriented by fear.
By fear.
And perhaps part of the problem is that in our schools we are taught to pass tests rather than to think.
That's right.
I'm wondering about St. Alcuin. Now your school, your Montessori school, and your church are named after St. Alcuin, who was one of the great teachers. Tell us about him.
Well, St. Alcuin was a genius, and he very quickly in his life in the church, and all educated people were in the church in those days. He was born in the middle of the 8th century, and by the time he was 35 or so, he was the Archbishop of York, and he was well known for his teaching and his interest in education. And Charlemagne, who was the great political leader of all Europe, as he later became, asked him to come to Europe to organize an educational system, because Charlemagne knew the value of education. He said, you know, that Europe would not be able to organize itself and become the great empire of union of all the peoples of Europe without education. So he asked Alcuin to come to Europe, and he did. And he organized the schools and the monasteries, and he put a sign over the door once again. It says, if you learn when you're young, you can teach when you're old. And if you don't learn when you're young, you're not going to be able to teach when you're old. And he emphasized the importance of the gathering of manuscripts and the binding of the manuscripts. And he imported manuscripts from Orient for the first time. He was never canonized because he got outside the bounds of the church, you know, in regard to education. But he was a true educational genius, and he was the first one to emphasize the preservation of educational techniques on the material plane. That is, the saving of manuscripts and the building of libraries, so that this knowledge could be used out here, you know. It took a long, long time for this to finally flower in the Renaissance and the Reformation in Europe, you know.
Right. Well, now getting back to death, and I'm easily distracted because of the quality of your imagination. What happens in death?
Well, in order to understand this, you have to understand that the consciousness of the individual is due to the energy, as we tried to explain it earlier in this conversation, of the soul. The person who is aware of himself in the body and aware of his environment is aware because his soul or his consciousness is vibrating, literally vibrating, like science explains vibration. A string vibrates when it is subject to another vibration, you know, on an instrument. And so the soul vibrates. And when it vibrates to the environment or the way we're thinking and so forth, it makes it possible for us to create thoughts and pictures and feelings within ourselves. And this is literally the origin of our self-consciousness. It causes us to have the sensation of being in the body, and it is this consciousness that holds the body together. The soul is a magnetic thing that holds the body together, and it stays in the body as long as the soul is expressing the purpose which it had in itself when the incarnation began. That is, when it was born into the body at the first breath that a little baby takes. Well, after the purpose which we just referred to has been completed in the lifetime, and all the experiences that are necessary and that possible in that life have been experienced, then the soul decides that it's time to simply withdraw from the body. And it withdraws in a very orderly, lawful way. It'll destroy the body. Sometimes it destroys it by disease. Sometimes it simply leaves the body and causes the body to be destroyed by suddenly leaving the body, say, for example, in a heart attack. But no matter how it leaves the body, it does so because there is no longer any possibility of continuing the life in the body in line with the purpose, which was the original reason for the incarnation. After the soul is literally lifted out of the body, and I have been present in a lot of situations where people have died, and I learned early, because of what I know, to look for the leaving of the energy of the soul, and you can see it.
What do you see?
All you have to do is just look at it. Well, it looks like an energy, a light. It looks like sort of some people might call it a mist, or whatever, but it's definitely an entity. You can see it holding itself together, and it will leave gradually, and it sometimes will be with the body or hover over the body for quite a long time. Sometimes it will leave almost immediately, and it will be at a distance. First time I ever saw this was when I was taking some pre-med courses at the University of Michigan, and I saw this great light come into this auditorium, and I was in an amphitheater. A patient was on the table giving birth to a baby. This was being, the services of the doctors and the interns were being given to this patient so that they could demonstrate this to us students. And we were behind a glass, and the instruction was being given to us on a public address system. And all of a sudden, just as the baby was about to be born, I saw this tremendous light, and I turned over and I said to this man next to me, do you see that light? And he says, no, I don't see any light. I saw this light, and then I realized that the light was gathering and it was going down toward this person, and I never heard of this before. I saw the light then focus upon the person, and all of a sudden it just went into it. The next time I saw that was in the beginning of the picture called Ben-Hur, when Jesus was born. When the movie did that,
That dramatized it a little bit.
This great light came into the earth, and it went right into the place where...
Well, is that like the aura?
It is the aura.
It is the aura.
Yeah. It is the aura. It is the energy of the aura. In the physical body, the electronic energy is really a psychic energy. Same thing. The word psychic means soul. The word electronic is the modern word for the vibration of energy, And that energy is in every body. It's in your body, my body, every physical body. It's in the body of a plant. That living plant is vibrating because this energy is in the plant. And when the soul is able to do in the body what it needs to do, and there is a surplus of energy, and the person wants to communicate with thought or feeling to someone outside, then this aura can be built up. Some people have so much energy as a natural thing around them that their auras are always very large, very big.
Now, the ability to enter our inner selves seems to be part of the problem that we're having with not growing and not developing as we should.
Well, we're so externalized in America, in the Western world. We are concerned with material happenings, and this is the way it should be because it's a step that we have to take in our civilization to master the material world, and eventually to bring to pass or bring to focus the great spiritual truths into the world of matter. The manufacture and of goods and services and the handling of the material world to express the spiritual truth of the soul. And this is going to happen someday, but in the present time, the material world is the focus of our consciousness, and when you take your consciousness away from your external world and put it within yourself, it takes a great effort and a tremendous amount of perseverance to make this a natural and a habitual thing. It's in meditation, concentration, meditation, the ability to focus within oneself.
Now, you tell us that traditional religion has failed us in bringing us forward, and I'm inclined to agree with you, because I believe that individuals in their intelligence are seeking out a spirituality that is not available in some of the traditional.
They are.
Yeah.
A very good example of this was last fall I received an invitation from one of the members of an adult class at the Highland Park Methodist Church here. And the last 2 Sundays I went to that class as they invited me to talk about and discuss the doctrines of reincarnation and karma. Now, this is amazing to me that they would even want to do that, but to invite me over there is even more amazing to talk about reincarnation and karma. And we did, and it was exciting because every member of that class was very interested in this idea, And we got into this idea of the soul and how we could become more conscious of the soul, by going within ourselves. The world, the spiritual world, is within you. Jesus said this so simply. He said, the kingdom of heaven is within you.
But no one really understood that, or not a lot of people.
Nobody believes that,
It used to be, I certainly know what you're saying, it used to be that the words occult and mysticism were something that were spoken of in giggling ways.
That's right.
and in disbelief. And now we listen, and we hope that the source of the information is articulate, and we're perfectly willing to believe.
Yeah, we are. The word occult means hidden, and the word mystical means things that are hidden, to be revealed. And it's just as simple as that. Science today is the most occult activity on the face of this planet.
In the sense that it deals with the hidden.
It deals with hidden energies. See, if they had known what was hidden when the Challenger took off, they would have known what was going to be the problem, but they didn't know that.
Do you believe that reincarnation is of increasing interest?
Yes, it is. Because life doesn't make any sense to people. I mean, for no other reason, Why are people born in different situations in life? Some people are born poor, some people are born rich, some people are born with apparently no opportunity to get an education. Some people are born with every opportunity to get an education. Some people are born with good health, other people are born with poor health. Why? The disciples asked Jesus, when he healed the person who was blind from birth, he says, was this person born blind from birth because of his parents or because of himself? And Jesus says, well, to be basic about this, he was born blind in order to show forth the glory of God, the great laws, of reincarnation.
What did the Buddha mean by the wheel of life?
Reincarnation. He was describing how we go around in circles. Human beings go around in circles, not the way he was describing it, but he was describing how we describe this great circle. We go up and we go over and around and we come back and we are in the eternal round of reincarnation and rebirth and resurrection, as long as we're not liberated from the material consciousness and the material world. As long as we desire to be born, we're going to be born.
We have been talking with A.A. Taliaferro, rector of St. Alquin's Community Church. This has been Conversations at the Dallas Public Library. I'm Erv Eatenson.